In recent years, horror movies, dark dramas, and stories about conspiracies have had a burst in popularity. It's easy to get swept up in fictional tales of tragedy and horror, and forget that life can be exceptionally creepy. From family curses to alleged government cover-ups, today we're taking a dive into the biggest and most popular encyclopedia to bring you 5 scary Wikipedia pages that will take you down the rabbit hole. The links to these will be included in the description if you want to do your own research on these. But you've been warned, you can spend hours delving into these. Now before we begin, we'd like to say a special thanks to this video's sponsor, Raid Shadow Legends. Raid is a fantasy-infused turn-based RPG with millions of players and scores of bosses. If you don't already have it, download the game using our link below for either mobile or PC platforms. And when you do, prepare yourself for a true console-level experience, with countless champions paired with hundreds of artifacts, unique skills and breathtaking campaigns. Our favourite part about Raid is that interactivity is first nature to the game and necessary for success. It encourages from the beginning that you join clans, fight clan bosses, and enter tournaments to claim superiority amongst your peers. And if bragging rights isn't enough, Raid provides weekly rewards for clan battles, as well as loads of experience points and other valuable artifacts. It's the perfect blend of teamwork, strategy, and entertainment, all integral parts to storytelling with a twist. We can't wait to dive in with our 2 favourite champions, Kale and the Occult Brawler. Kale is easily the strongest starter you can get, and we've been using him everywhere since day 1. He's a very good farmer when geared correctly, and has 2 skills that attack multiple enemies and can place poison debuffs. Occult Brawler's skills, on the other hand, are so unique, and he deals a huge amount of damage, and has been performing well for us against the clan boss and other tough foes, like various dungeon bosses. Because Raid just hit their 2-year anniversary, they've got a month and a half of awesome events and tournaments, and there's no sign of them slowing down yet. This month they're releasing a new batch of epic and legendary champions, which look amazing. They're also releasing their 2nd version of the Doom Tower. This means new rewards, new gear to win to customize your champions, but also 2 brutal looking bosses to take on, the Celestial Griffin and the Eternal Dragon. If Raid sounds like the interactive gaming giant you've been waiting for, click the link in the description or scan our personalized QR code and you'll get your free epic champion, 100,000 silver, 50 gems, and 3 ancient shards bonuses, giving you a jump start as soon as you get in game. We promise it's that easy. Just click the link in the description and begin crafting your interactive legacy. And now, as always, if you haven't already done so, hit those lights, sit back, and enjoy. Brazil's little-known radioactive accident. In 1985, a private radiotherapy institute located in the Brazilian state of Goiás moved to new premises. But without informing the authorities, they left behind a cesium-137 teletherapy unit that contained a small capsule containing about 93 grams of highly radioactive cesium chloride that, if fell into the wrong hands, could be deadly. The machine sat in the abandoned building in downtown Goiânia for over a year, whilst an ongoing legal dispute about the building and its radioactive chemicals ensued. Finally, in 1986, the court posted a security guard to protect the building until the dispute was resolved. However, on September 13, 1987, whilst the security guard was absent from his post, Roberto dos Santos Alves and Wagner Mota Pereira illegally entered the partially demolished facility and stumbled across the teletherapy unit. Thinking it might have some scrap value, they removed the source assembly, placed it in a wheelbarrow, and wheeled it to Alves' home. The 2 men then tried to dismantle the equipment. The following day, Pereira began to experience diarrhea and dizziness, and his left hand began to swell. He visited his local doctor, who told him his symptoms were the result of something he had eaten, and told him to go home and rest. Alves, however, despite also feeling unwell, continued with his efforts to dismantle the equipment, and eventually released the cesium capsule from its protective rotating head, and succeeded in puncturing the capsule's aperture window with a screwdriver. As he looked through the puncture hole, he could see a glowing blue light coming from within the capsule. He then inserted a screwdriver through the hole and successfully scooped out some of the glowing substance. Thinking it may be a type of gunpowder, he then tried to light it, but the powder would not ignite. A few days later, on September 18th, Alves sold the items to a local scrapyard owner named Diver Alves Ferreira, who also noticed the blue glow from the punctured capsule. Thinking the substance was valuable or even supernatural, Diver took it to his house, and over the next 3 days, he invited friends and family around to view the odd glowing material. On September 21st, Diver's friend succeeded in freeing several rice-sized grains of the glowing substance from the capsule using a screwdriver. Diver then dished these glowing grains out to various friends and family members. On September 25th, 1987, Diver sold the device to a second scrapyard. However, the day before the sale, Diver's brother Ivo took some of the glowing substance home and spread it on a concrete floor. Later, his 6-year-old daughter ate a sandwich while sitting on this floor. She was fascinated by the powder's blue glow, applying it to her body and showing it off to her mother. Dust from the powder fell onto the sandwich she was eating, and unbeknown to her parents at the time, she absorbed a fatal dose of radiation. Diver's wife was the first to notice that many people around her had become severely ill at the same time, and on September 28, 1987, 15 days after the item was stolen from the Institute, she reclaimed the materials from the second scrapyard, and in a sealed plastic bag took them to a hospital. After tests, the presence of radioactivity was detected and immediate action was taken. News of the radiation incident was broadcast on local, national, and international media. Within days, nearly 130,000 people swarmed local hospitals, concerned that they might have been exposed. Of those, 250 were indeed found to be contaminated. Eventually, 20 people showed signs of radiation sickness and required treatment. Sadly, those who had direct contact with the substance were not so lucky. The first to die was 18-year-old Admilson Alves de Souza, who was an employee of Diver Ferreira, who worked on the radioactive source. He developed lung cancer, internal bleeding and heart damage, and died on October 18, 1987. A few days later, on October 23rd, little Lade Ferreira died a horrible death. Her upper body swelled, her hair fell out, and she sustained kidney and lung damage, as well as internal bleeding. She eventually died of septicemia and generalized infection in Rio de Janeiro. Lade was buried in a common cemetery, in a special fiberglass coffin lined with lead to prevent the spread of radiation. Despite these measures, on the day of her burial, more than 2,000 people turned up at the cemetery to protest, fearing that her corpse would poison the surrounding land. They tried to prevent her burial by using stones and bricks to block the cemetery roadway. Nevertheless, she was eventually buried, but it was far from a peaceful send-off. Gabriella, aged 37, the wife of Diver, and the person who alerted authorities to the sickness, also died on October 23rd. She developed hair loss and internal bleeding, especially of the limbs, eyes, and digestive tract, and died of septicemia and generalized infection, the same as her niece. Another employee, aged 22, of Diver, developed serious respiratory and lymphatic complications and died on October 27th. Diver himself miraculously survived, despite receiving 7 grey units of radiation. But his life was blighted by the incident, and in 1994 he died of cirrhosis aggravated by depression and binge drinking. His brother Ivo died of emphysema in 2003 after also being afflicted by depression. Hundreds of others were also affected after being exposed to low levels of radiation. In light of the deaths caused, the 3 doctors who had owned and operated the Radiotherapy Institute were charged with criminal negligence, and measures were put in place to ensure it never happened again. The incident is a tragic but little-known radiation accident that rarely gets talked about. The tragic tale of Charles Domery. Charles Domery was born in Bench, Poland in around 1778. He was one of 9 brothers, all of whom had huge appetites. Apart from his extraordinary appetite, Domery appeared normal in every other way. He was slightly taller than the average man at the time, standing at around 6 foot 3 inches, but was of average build and weight for his height. Domery was described as having long brown hair, grey eyes and smooth skin, with a pleasant demeanour, with no signs of mental illness, low intelligence or any other ailment. By the age of 13, Domery had enlisted in the Prussian army and became part of the army that besieged Thionville during the First Coalition War. However, the Prussian army was suffering from food shortages, which Domery found unbearable. So he surrendered to the French in return for food and was rewarded by the French commander with a large melon, which he immediately devoured, even eating the rind. Domery then enlisted with the French Revolutionary Army and shocked his new comrades with his unusual eating habits and voracious appetite. Despite being granted double rations and using his pay to buy additional food, he still suffered from extreme hunger. It is said that in a single year, whilst based at an army camp near Paris, Domery ate 174 cats, leaving just their skins and bones, and munched through 4 to 5 pounds of grass every day. Domery's favourite food was a raw bullock's liver, and he preferred all his meat uncooked. It was later noted by the doctors who studied him that he never vomited other than when fed large amounts of cooked meat. But perhaps one of his most inhumane acts happened while he served on board the French ship Hoche. One of his fellow sailors had his leg shot off by a cannon fire, and instead of helping him, Domery grabbed the severed limb and began to eat it, until a crew member wrestled it from him and threw it into the sea. In October 1798, a Royal Navy squadron under the command of Sir John Bolas Warren captured the Hoche off the coast of Ireland, and those on board, including Domery, were incarcerated in a prison camp near Liverpool. The British guards at the prison were shocked by Domery's appetite, and agreed to place him on double rations, but these were still insufficient for his needs, and his rations were continually increased, until eventually he was granted the rations of 10 men each day. But Domery still remained hungry, and went on to eat the prison cat, and at least 20 rats which had strayed into his cell. It was also noted that he would regularly eat the prison's candles, and the medicines of those prisoners in the camp's infantry who refused to take them, but suffered no apparent adverse effects as a result. He would also resort to drinking contaminated water to wash down his food after his rations of uncontaminated beverages ran out. Disturbed by Domery's obsession with food, the prison commander alerted the medical services responsible for overseeing the welfare of prisoners of war. Dr. Johnston and Dr. Cochrane were assigned to his case and performed a test to measure Domery's eating capacity and tolerance for unusual foods. These were the observations they made. At 4 a.m, Domery was awakened and fed 4 pounds of raw cow's udder, which was eaten without hesitation. At 9:30 a.m, he was given a meal of 5 pounds of raw beef, 12 large tallow candles totaling 1 pound, and a bottle of beer, all of which were consumed. At 1 p.m, Domery was given another meal of a further 5 pounds of beef, a pound of candles, and 3 large bottles of beer, all of which were also eaten and drunk. During the course of the experiment, he did not defecate, urinate, or vomit at any point. His pulse remained regular, and his skin did not change temperature. Upon Domery's return to his quarters at 6:15 p.m, following the conclusion of the experiment, he was recorded as being of particularly good cheer, and danced, smoked his pipe, and drank a further bottle of beer. The cause of Domery's appetite is unknown, and there have been no modern documented cases of polyphagia, excessive appetite as extreme as his. It's speculated Domery may have suffered from hyperthyroidism, a condition that can induce an extreme appetite and rapid weight loss. However, because it is not recorded what became of Domery after his release from prison, no follow-up of his symptoms were made. The Von Erich family curse. The Von Erich family is an American professional wrestling family originating from Texas. The family's actual surname is Adkisson, but every family member who has been in the wrestling business had used the ring name Von Erich, which was originally devised by the family patriarch Jack Adkisson, known professionally Fritz von Erich, as he portrayed a villainous German Nazi character in the ring. Outside of their wrestling careers, the Von Erich family are most notable for the alleged curse surrounding them. When Jack Adkisson, 68, passed away from cancer in Denton County in 1997, all but one of his children had predeceased him. The firstborn child, Jack Baron Adkisson Jr., was born September 21, 1952. When playing outside the family's Niagara Falls, New York home in 1959, he received an electric shock from an exposed wire and fell unconscious into a puddle where he drowned. He was just 6 years old. Moving on to the third Atkinson child, David Allen was born July 22nd of 1958. He married in 1978, aged 20, and had his first daughter that year. But tragically, she died in infancy. David and his wife divorced less than a year later, and he remarried in 1982. On February 10, 1984, David died while in Tokyo, Japan. The US Embassy's death report claimed that the 26-year-old died of acute enteritis, which is the inflammation of the small intestine. But Ric Flair, a professional wrestling manager, claimed that everyone in wrestling believed David's death was a drug overdose. He added that the wrestler who found David had disposed of the narcotics by flushing them down the toilet before law enforcement arrived on the scene. Kerry Jean Atkinson, the fourth child, was born on February 3, 1960. He took his own life on February 18, 1993, on his father's ranch in Denton County, Texas, by shooting himself in the chest with a .44 caliber gun. A retired professional wrestler named Bret Hart claimed that Kerry had told him in the months prior to his death that he planned to commit suicide. He reportedly wanted to follow his late brothers and said that they were calling to him. His marriage had fallen apart and he believed that his death was inevitable. Sadly, this was just the one of many suicides in the Atkinson family. Mike Brett Atkinson, the second youngest child, was born on March 2nd of 1964. Shortly after his wedding in 1985, he had to get surgery after injuring his shoulder. Afterwards, he was found to have toxic shock syndrome. As a result of his condition and his surgery, he was unable to return to the ring at full strength and was forced to retire. He took his own life on April 12th of 1987 in Denton County by overdosing on tranquilizers. He was just 23. The last child of Jack Atkinson was Chris Barton, born September 30th, 1969. There were many factors which influenced his wrestling career and made it impossible for him to reach the success that his siblings had in the ring. Chris was only 5'4" and suffered from both asthma and brittle bones, making him a less than ideal candidate for a wrestling career. After years of being unable to live up to the Von Erich family name, Chris became depressed and frustrated. Additionally, he was heartbroken over the loss of his brother Mike. In 1991, just 18 days before his 22nd birthday, he took his life via a gunshot to the head. The only surviving member of the second generation of the Von Erich family is Kevin Ross Atkinson, who was born on May 15th of 1957 and is the second oldest of the siblings. He is known professionally as the Golden Warrior and had a successful career in pro wrestling. He has 4 children with his wife, whom he married in 1980. His 2 sons have had their own successful wrestling careers. The third generation of Von Erichs has managed to evade the so-called family curse, but the tragedy surrounding the family is horrifying nonetheless. Piseth Pilika. Born December 4th, 1965, Piseth Pilika was a Cambodian ballet dancer who had an extremely successful career during the 1980s and 90s, where she appeared in numerous films, advertisements, and karaoke videos. Piseth began to study Cambodian cultural dance in 1980. Her aunt, a fine arts teacher, was incredibly supportive of his choice of career. Piseth completed her studies in 1988 and continued to work at the school as a lead dancer. As her popularity grew, she was invited to star in her own film, translated as Shadow of Darkness. It was here during her acting career that the young woman met a well-known actor named Kai Piseth. The couple married in 1990, and 2 years later they had their first child together. As well as having a successful on-screen career, Piseth was also an active stage performer who toured across the US, India, Japan, China, Korea, Thailand, and in various countries throughout Europe. On July 6, 1999, Piseth was shopping at Fom Fez au Russell's Market when she was shot in broad daylight by an unknown male assailant. Her 7-year-old niece was also wounded in the shooting. Piseth was in critical condition in hospital until July 13th, when she passed away. She was only 34 years old. Her funeral attracted over 10,000 mourners, making it one of the largest attended ceremonies in recent Cambodian history. Piseth's murder was a high-profile case, but despite this, it remains cold. Just months after the shooting, in October of 1999, the French magazine La Express claimed that the actress's diary exposed an affair she was having with the Cambodian Prime Minister, a man named Hun Sen, who has been in power since 1984. Upon discovering this affair, the magazine pointed the finger at the Prime Minister's wife, Bun Rani, and alleged that she had already hit on Piseth. The magazine added that on her deathbed, the 34-year-old actress had named Bun Rani to several people, something which Bun Rani denied, before announcing that she would bring charges to the magazine for defamation. L'Express shot back, claiming that they had proof they'd produce in court if the case went ahead, including witnesses, documents and business papers that would prove the affair, and that Piseth was murdered out of jealousy. During the couple's affair, the Prime Minister allegedly gave her checks, which Bun Rani later blocked her from accessing. He also reportedly gifted Piseth a house. One journalist who worked for L'Express noted that the diary had been verified as belonging to the 34-year-old. Handwriting experts had analysed it, and fingerprints on the diary were matched to Piseth. Hun Sen has denied any involvement in the murder of Piseth, and also denied being involved in an affair with the actress. At the time, he blamed the opposition party leader for fabricating the claims. Bun Rani never brought charges against the French magazine. In January of 2013, a book named Piseth Pilika, A True and Horrible Story was published, which contained extracts from the 34-year-old's alleged diary. In it, Piseth detailed her relationship with a high-ranking official and noted the violent threats she'd received from the official's wife. The book reportedly sold well until it was taken from the shelves by undercover police officers. Piseth Pilika's case is still unsolved. No charges have ever been brought, and no suspects have ever been identified. The kidnapping of foreign engineers in Chechnya. On October 3rd of 1998, a well-armed group of around 20 Chechen-speaking men captured 4 foreign engineers from their home in Grozny, the capital of the Chechen Republic of Ichkeria. The victims of the abduction included 3 British men, 46-year-old Peter Kennedy, 26-year-old Darren Hickey, and 42-year-old Rudy Petschke, as well as one New Zealander named Stan Shaw, who was 58 at the time and had been living in the UK. 3 of the men were employed by Granger Telecom, while Peter Kennedy was employed by British Telecom. The men were in Grozny to install a telecommunications system at the time of their vanishing. Reportedly, the attackers had a brief gunfight with the bodyguards of the men, during which one of the kidnappers was injured. The sound of gunfire was so frequent in Grozny that the engineers didn't think anything upon hearing it and didn't react. They were quickly grabbed by the group of men and taken hostage. It wasn't long before law enforcement became involved in the case. Authorities launched raids on the homes of suspected kidnappers, releasing over 60 hostages in the process, but the 4 engineers were never located. Several suspects were arrested in the case, but they were released quickly, as authorities were hindered by a lack of evidence. Less than a week later, on October 8th, a spokesman for Chechnya's security ministry said that the men were alive and well, but that the kidnappers were yet to announce any ransom demands or conditions for their release. At the end of November, the criminal group finally made a statement where they promised the 4 engineers would be released in exchange for $10 million. The British Foreign and Commonwealth Office, however, already announced that it was government policy not to pay ransoms, but Granger Telecoms agreed to find the money. On December 8th, the heads of all 4 men were found in a sack on the side of a highway in a Chechen village. They were identified by one of their bodyguards. In a press conference 2 days later, the Vice President showed a recorded videotape in which the 4 victims were forced to dress in military uniform and confess in Russian to spying for German, English and Israeli special services, as well as the CIA. Security forces claimed that the men were slain at an unused factory south of Grozny after a rescue operation went wrong. It was suggested that the executions were a show of defiance to authorities by the kidnappers. The families of the victims claimed that the botched rescue attempt ruined the negotiations that were going on between Granger Telecom and the perpetrators. At the end of the month, on December 29th, officials located 4 headless corpses on the outskirts of Grozny. They paid $2,000 per body for their return. All 4 men were flown back to the UK, where the medical examiner determined that they had been starved of food and water, tied up and repeatedly beaten. They'd been decapitated using a large knife and were extremely malnourished at the time of their demise. Although there have been several suspects in the slaying of the men, nobody has ever been charged. Most of the suspected perpetrators are warlords, and the case appears to have gone cold. So that's it for this video. And remember, if you haven't already heard, we have a new channel solely dedicated to astronomy. If you have an interest in space, the unanswered questions of the universe, and our search for life out there, you'll love Access Astronomy. Check it out in the description below. And as always, thanks for watching.